I turn to Daniel Bob to introduce and chair the next panel.
Okay, thanks again. We're going to move right on to the next panel, which is from trade to international integration. This panel is a little bit shorter. It's only an hour, and Wendy does have some obligations, so I'm going to dispense with long introductions, but simply say that we've got a terrific panel. And as all of you know, I'm sure Wendy, acting Deputy USTR, is now responsible for pretty much the entire world these days, but she's also leading the TPP negotiations on Japan. Just finished the third bilateral with Tokyo on autos, insurance, and other non-tariff barriers, and been working on trade since the bad old days of the seemingly endless trade conflicts. Actually cut her teeth at USTR working on the U.S.-Japan semiconductor arrangements of 1991. We also have with us Professor Watanabe, who is one of Japan's most respected trade experts and is currently Professor of International Political Economy at Keio University. But he's also been a practitioner, having spent 20 years in government working on trade policy, including as Japan's chief negotiator for the Japan-Mexico Economic Partnership, 5 years in Geneva working on the Uruguay round, 3 years in Brussels working on Japan-EU trade matters. And you should all have hard copies of his PowerPoint. If not, it'll obviously be on the screen, but also will be available on the website of PIIE as well as SPF USA. And finally, Jeff Schott, who I think everyone here knows, is for all his terrific work on trade that he's done here at PIIE, but he also has taught over the years at Princeton and Georgetown, spent 8 years at Treasury working on trade and energy, serves as an advisor to Committee on Trade to State, and a member of the U.S. Government Trade and Energy Policy Advisory Committee. So we'd like to start with Wendy, and you can stay there or?
Stay here.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Dan, for the kind introduction. It's always great to be back at the Peterson Institute, and I really appreciate the invitation. I thought during the next 10 minutes I would talk mainly about TPP and particularly about Japan's participation in TPP. When I was preparing these remarks last night, it hit me that it's just about 2 years ago from the time that then Prime Minister Noda announced in Honolulu Japan's and I won't get the wording right because it was a very strange combination of words, but basically his interest in consulting with other TPP members towards joining TPP. And I remember spending time with others in my delegation trying to carefully study these words to make sure that we totally understood them, which we did, and we viewed that as a signal of Japan's interest in joining TPP, and we were very welcoming of Japan's interest. And the minute we got back from Honolulu, we launched a domestic consultation process, which was then accompanied by consultations with Japan. These consultations spanned over 1 year. They were extremely long. At times they were difficult, but we were able to come up with a strong package of outcomes, which included assurances and a sense that Japan understood the expectations of the United States and other TPP partners with respect to achieving a high standard comprehensive agreement. And we were also able to make inroads on a number of the bilateral issues of concern that were raised by our stakeholders in the consultation process. As a result, we in April we were able to announce that the United States supported Japan's entry into TPP, and then Japan needed to get the approval from the other TPP countries, which it quickly did, and then was able to actually join the negotiations in July. There was some concern among some TPP countries and some people in my country that that any country joining a negotiation 3 years into it would slow down the process, and particularly a country as big as Japan. And I'm proud to say today, and I see a number of my Japanese colleagues here, that in fact, it's really the opposite. That Japan not only has not slowed down the negotiations, it's really hit the ground running. It has seamlessly integrated itself into the negotiations. It is working closely with the United States and other TPP partners in achieving high standard outcomes in areas such as intellectual property protection, state-owned enterprises, investment and services, and the list goes on and on. We attribute this to a number of factors, including a real commitment from the Prime Minister to the negotiation, which was passed on to his negotiating team. We also attribute this to something that Japan has never done in past negotiations, and that is really put its negotiators in the Prime Minister's office. So we're no longer negotiating with 5 different ministries. There's a real structure or real centralization to the structure, and we think this has contributed to Japan's seamless integration into the negotiations. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say, and I think Japan's team has over 100 negotiators that come to each round, that it's a really hard-working team, and they have not only taken the instructions from above, but they've also really given themselves to working with others to find creative solutions and to move the negotiations forward. Taking a step back, Japan's entry into the TPP negotiations really increased the economic value of the negotiation. I think about 40% now of GDP is accounted for by the 12 TPP partners. And its entry also sparked interest throughout the region, including by Japan's neighboring countries. Japan's entry into the TPP is a key component of what you're all discussing and the subject of this conference, of the Prime Minister's Third Arrow reforms. And I'll get more into this in a little bit, particularly when I address some of the non-tariff measures we are negotiating with Japan in our parallel bilateral negotiations. So, in short, we welcome the close cooperation with Japan on a range of issues, and we value Japan as a close negotiating partner in these negotiations. Now, I could stop there, but you all know I'm not going to. So now I'd like to turn to really 2 challenging and difficult issues that we do have on our agenda with Japan as we go forward in these negotiations. The first has to deal with the market access negotiations, particularly the tariff negotiations, and particularly for agricultural products. Japan's free trade agreements, or EPAs as Japan calls them to date, have largely excluded a range of sensitive agricultural products. So when it would negotiate with its partners, if it had sensitive products, it would take them off the table and they would not be included in the agreement. In joining TPP, Japan recognized that this approach would not work, as it was signing up to an agreement which was aiming for an ambitious and comprehensive outcome. We are heartened to see that there was a very serious debate in Japan about opening up the agricultural sector in the lead up to Japan's interest in joining TPP. And to us, that demonstrates that Japan understood that this wasn't going to be a typical EPA negotiation like their former negotiations. We're also heartened to see that there's a lot of emphasis being put on agricultural reform as part of the third arrow. For example, Ministry of Agricultural officials recently announced their intention to revise existing policies that intentionally curtail rice cultivation acreage in order to boost rice prices. All that said, we recognize that opening up the agricultural market is a really sensitive and difficult undertaking by any prime minister, and for Prime Minister Abe, that he faces opposition not only from farmers and from the opposition party, but also from within his party. Japan will have tough decisions to make in these negotiations. Japan's not alone here. Japan has sensitivities in the agricultural sector. Every TPP partner comes to these negotiations with sensitivities. And the challenge is really trying to work through these sensitivities in a way that does not lower the ambition or the comprehensive nature of the agreement, but also somehow addresses the sensitivities in a way that both sides can agree on. With respect to tariff negotiations, there are a number of tools that are typically used by trade negotiators to do this. The most prominent one is to have very long phasing periods for the reduction and elimination of tariffs. The other area I wanted to emphasize that is also challenging and difficult are the issues that we're facing in our parallel bilateral negotiations with Japan. When we agreed to support Japan in the TPP negotiations, we recognized that certain issues, particularly certain longstanding issues we have with Japan, would not be addressed in the TPP agreement. And so we set up a structure with Japan where we would have parallel bilateral negotiations, and these negotiations would conclude at the same time as the TPP negotiations. A number of people have asked, well, why are you having parallel bilateral negotiations? This should all be done with TPP, within the TPP group. And we respond and point to that Japan has free trade agreements with many TPP partners already, and in fact is negotiating bilateral FTAs or EPAs with a number of TPP countries as the TPP negotiations go forward. In fact, if you exclude countries from which Japan has concluded FTAs or is in the process of negotiating FTAs, it leaves out just the United States and New Zealand. So in our view, having these parallel bilateral negotiations allows us to have a framework to address the bilateral issues that we face with Japan. These negotiations, everyone thinks they're just about autos, and I'll get to that in a minute, but I would remiss to, particularly in this morning's event, not to underscore that we're also looking to achieve strong outcomes with respect to a number of non-tariff measures beyond the non-tariff measures in the automotive sector. And these include cross-cutting issues that affect all sectors of the economy, but they also include a handful of sectoral issues as well. A number of these areas, and I'll just name a few, promoting foreign direct investment, promoting corporate governance, improving the government procurement system, and strengthening transparency are issues that are all being addressed in the context of Abe's, the Prime Minister's, reform program and in his the third arrow package. And so we see real synergy between what the Prime Minister is trying to promote, a more open and more open economy in Japan, one that's subject to more competition, and one that promotes transparency and reform. So we see a real synergy between what Japan's trying to achieve on its own and the issues that are under discussion with respect to non-tariff measures. With respect to the automotive issues, these are very serious issues that we are addressing, and we've made it very clear to Japan that we need to see very strong outcomes in these negotiations on a range of non-tariff measures, ranging from standards to certification to distribution to transparency. We've had 3 rounds of these negotiations to date. We have made some progress, but we still have a great deal of work to do. We have made it clear to Japan the priority that we are placing on all of these issues being addressed in the parallel bilateral negotiations, and we've agreed with Japan that these negotiations should conclude at the same time as the TPP negotiations conclude. And that gives me a good segue just to talk about the TPP negotiations more generally. As I'm sure you've heard, and my boss seems to be saying this all around town, that we now are in the end game of the TPP negotiations. The negotiations have been underway for over 3 years now. We've made enormous progress. There's clearly work that remains to be done. But the issues that we need to work on and the issues that we need to reach compromises on are well known to everyone. These are tough issues, but that's natural for trade negotiations. The tough issues generally are left for the end. And at the TPP leaders meeting in Bali, the TPP leaders discussed some tough issues and the challenges, that they're facing in their own countries in these negotiations. But they also came to a consensus that we should proceed to resolve all outstanding issues with the objective of completing the negotiations this year. This is an ambitious timetable, but we believe doable. But at the same time, we will not. At the same time, the substance will need to drive the process. We are working very hard at USTR and other government agencies to move the negotiation to its conclusion. There are scores of meetings and conversations and telephone calls taking place at all levels on any given day. And I think on any given day, at any given time in the day, you can drive by USTR if you can see through some of the curtains that are over our building, that the lights are really on late, and the lights are on throughout the weekends now. As I tell some of my friends, I've been at USTR for 25 years. I thought I worked hard. Now I'm really working hard. So let me just conclude by saying, just getting back to Japan, that we have a lot of work to do with all the TPP partners to bring these negotiations home. We believe that work is doable. And in that spirit, we are working with Japan on the same time frame to address the challenging issues that we face in this negotiation. We do believe that we have an extremely important and unique opportunity through these TPP negotiations to work with Japan, not only to establish together high standards for the region, but also a unique and important opportunity to resolve our longstanding issues and then work together to promote reform, market opening, the rule of law in the Asia-Pacific region. This is a big job. We have our work cut out for us, but if we get it right, we believe that we will succeed not only in strengthening the U.S.-Japan economic and overall relationship, but we'll be able to establish new rules of the road for trade and investment in really the most dynamic region of the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. Really appreciate that, and all your valiant efforts, particularly under sequestration, when you've lost people, and when the government was shut down, even fewer. You're one of the smallest, probably the most efficient agencies in the U.S. government. Professor Watanabe.
Yes, thank you. With your permission, may I go to, excuse me. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Yori Watanabe, professor at Keio University in Tokyo. I'd like to express my sincere thanks to the organizers, the Peterson Institute for International Economics, and also Sasagawa Foundation, Sasagawa Peace Foundation here in the United States. It is really a great honor for me to be here. And I feel extremely excited because I'm on the panel together with Wendy Cutler, with whom I worked almost more than 20 years ago in Geneva on the government procurement issue. At that time, she was still working for the Commerce Department, and we had very detailed discussion about the government procurement. So she's a real connoisseur of Japanese trade policies, and I think we got the right person to negotiate the trade issues on that. And also, I'm very happy to be together with Geoffrey Schott. We have been together for many occasions, including the one at the end of August in Seoul, to talk about TPP and its ramifications on Korea's foreign trade issues. Ladies and gentlemen, today I prepared quite extensive slide, but Dan told me that the 10 minutes is very short. It's very cruel for university professor. We used to work on the 90 minutes, so I have a bad habit of preparing a lot of slides, but let me show you some of them. The outline is the three arrows of Abenomics and Japan's economy in the global market. But that part, the Dan has suggested me to skip. So I'm straight on to the action plan to implement the growth strategy, just to revisit the decisions made in October 2013. And then I'd like to go on to the TPP and Japan's FTA EPA strategy, and I'd like to draw a conclusion at the end. So the first part is the three arrows of Abenomics, and this is what I have prepared the slides, but I think the discussion has been already rolling on this issue. So maybe I just pick up the very final point of this series of slides. Japan's position in the global economy, and in terms of internationalization, Japan has not really realized its potentials. And there's a strong tendency to focus more on domestic market, and that implies that Japanese companies seem to be limiting themselves to domestic market, with a few exceptions such as Toyota and Nippon Steel and all that. And also that implies that Japanese economies or Japanese companies are missing growth opportunities abroad. So therefore, this growth strategy and its coherent relation with trade policy is far more important. So now I'd like to introduce to you this outline of the action plan to implement the growth strategy. The Japanese government now accelerates and strengthens implementation of the growth strategy known as Japan Revitalization Strategy that was declared in June this year. And that constitutes the third arrow of Abenomics. And that was launched to change people's expectations into actions. And that contained the 5 different elements. The first one being infrastructure development for regulatory and institutional reforms. And it is considered to be boldly promote structural reforms with the 3-area approach. One is on a region-wide basis, 2 on a corporate basis, and on the nationwide basis as the third part. And creation of national strategic special zones as a breakthrough to change Japan's economic society, and bold regulatory and institutional reforms in such fields as medicine, education, agriculture, and city planning. And those are the issues to be tackled with under this heading. Second element is promotion of private investment and industrial metabolism. And generally, it is considered to mobilize all measures for the development of business environments, including tax incentives, in order to encourage companies to invest their management resources for the future. So the new tax incentives to promote capital investment that enhances productivity. Third element is employment, and the first panel discussed about the more opportunities for the female labor force. And this is really the most important element in this heading of employment system reform and enhancement of human capital. It is largely to accelerate initiatives for enhancing human capital and reforming the employment system, promote university reform being another option, including reform of the payroll system. And the second indent here, you see the swift implementation of the Zero Child Care Waiting List project and development of an environment where men and women can balance work and child rearing. So those are the policies to improve female labor force participation. The fourth element is creation of strategic market through structural reforms. And this part is maybe most important in terms of what Wendy said, the synergy between the growth strategy and free trade policies, including that of TPP. And this is largely designed to create new markets that will boost Japan's economic growth through regulatory and institutional reforms, as well as opening up markets that have been dominated by the public sector. So the first indent there, reform of healthcare and medical markets and the establishment of the Japan Medical Research Development Agency to monitor this development. And also the second indent there, the strengthening of agricultural competitiveness through consolidation of farmland. And that is going to be promoted by the bill to be enacted at the current session of the Diet, now currently going on. The fifth element is the implementation of growth strategy at regional level and innovation of small and medium-sized enterprises and small businesses. The implementation of the growth strategy by the united efforts of the central government together with the local governments and promote initiatives for the innovation of small and medium-sized enterprises and small business. I'd like to also stress the second indent saying that support for the promotion of business startups. Those are also a very important element under this heading. So altogether, the growth strategy is designed to increase coherence and also synergy with the trade policies. This is the agenda of the TPP, and a lot of issues such as competition or the government procurement, intellectual property rights, investment, those are certainly the most important elements to promote the growth strategy policies to be realized in the due course. And this is the different frameworks of the regional integrations across the Asia Pacific, and you are already familiar with those figures, so let me skip on this. 2010 there was APEC ministerial meeting, and leaders agreed that by 2020 they will make free trade area of Asia Pacific, and that's by and large kind of increasing connectivity of the countries and the regions, economies of this region through different roadmaps like ASEAN Plus 6, which is now called RCEP, and TPP, and also Japan, China, Korea trilateral FTAs. All of these to bring the economies across the Asia Pacific to a single free trade area of the APEC participating economies. So Japan has been reacting very positively with this, and Japan's FTA, known as Economic Partnership Agreement, has come into this picture. And of course, free trade agreement focus on the market access or improvement of market access, both in trade in goods and services, are certainly central part. But also, Japanese EPA has been quite comprehensive, bringing government procurement, movement of natural persons, competition policies, improvement of business environment, and also some other issues such as bilateral cooperation, and most importantly, the investment chapter. So this is the more detailed substance of Japanese EPA that I'd like to draw your attention to, maybe at a later stage. And this is the achievement so far. We have made 13 EPAs, 12 of them with individual countries, and one with Japan and ASEAN. Japan on one hand and ASEAN, 10 nations on the other. So altogether, we have 13 EPAs already in force that covers roughly 20% of Japan's external trade, and including the countries that we are currently under negotiation. I think the number of countries becomes 10. 10 countries we have been negotiating the FTAs. But all the difficulties that we have, particularly in the agricultural sector, tariff elimination in the TPP negotiation, as well as other bilateral negotiations like the one with Australia, the tariff negotiation is the most difficult part. And this chart tries to show you that Japan is now trying to the highest level, reach the highest level of its tariff offer. That is about 95%, and provided that the tariffs to be eliminated on highly sensitive sectors such as leathers, wine, chocolate, cookies, salt, tobacco, and beef tongue, amongst other things. And that is a way to reach 95%. If Japan sticks to the derogation of tariff elimination on the 5 sensitive product segments, namely rice, wheat, dairy product, beef, pork, and sugar, that will keep Japan's tariff elimination rate only to 93.5%. But that is still higher than the highest level of tariff concession that Japan has made in the previous 12 or 13 EPAs, that is 88.4%. So now Japanese government seems to be making a lot of efforts to improve its tariff elimination in the market access. That has been the stumbling block in the past exercise of Japanese EPA negotiations. So maybe I would say thanks to TPP inputs, I think Japan is finally struggling for this agriculture reform. So I'd like to talk about how Japan is now moving on. Japan enjoys a kind of dual membership, one to TPP since July this year, but Japan has been also very active partner in RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement in East Asia. And we see that complementarity between Japan's participation in RCEP and Japan's participation in TPP. How? In the RCEP, we have the Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar. Those countries, those are a little bit lagging behind to the development level of their ASEAN colleagues like Malaysia, Thailand, and Singapore. So there, Japan is bound to provide trade facilitation or capacity building to bring them onto the same boat of inclusive growth in the region. But at the same time, in the TPP, it's a more rule-oriented approach and high-level market access together with regulatory coherence or regulatory convergence, harmonization of standards, and so forth. So we can bring the results of TPP back to the RCEP, and that in that way, there could be a kind of interactions, very positive interactions that we can make, so that we can bring all of them to the free trade area of Asia Pacific. So this slide I want to show you because those are the three mega regions. You have EU, and across the Atlantic you have NAFTA or Americas, and East Asia. And now what we have is APEC. East Asia, between East Asia and Americas, we have APEC. And between East Asia and Europe, we have ASEM. ASEM is Asia-Europe meeting. And between EU and Americas, we used to have transatlantic marketplace or transatlantic economic council. But now it's stemming out from this kind of past experience of transatlantic corporations. We have TTIP. Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. And we have, in the context of Asia Pacific, we have TPP. So actually, we are all engaged in the same exercise of improving market access and rule making. Rule making that we missed the occasions to go on discussing about trade and investment, trade and competition, and transparency in the government procurement. All of these issues, rule-making issues, that we missed the occasion to go on the negotiations after Cancun meeting, September 2003. So if we can make a kind of convergence, the synergy or coherent negotiations, then that could maybe ended up in the strengthening of trade multilateralism embodied in WTO. So I'd like to bring up the issue of multilateralizing regionalism, the convergence of liberalization efforts in three mega FTAs, namely TPP, TTIP, and the Japan-EU EPA. And that will create a new momentum to reinforce the trade multilateralism embodied in the WTO. And in that context, Japan and the United States should work together for multilateral as well as interregional trade investment liberalization such as TPP. So my concluding remarks, Japan's EPA policy to multilateralize regionalism, so by all means to increase the coherence of synergy. The TPP across Asia Pacific, it's a ultimate FTA with the ultimate trading partner that is the United States for us. RCEP across the East Asia, that will continue to provide a legal framework to secure de facto business-driven integration. Thirdly, Japan, China, Korea, that's a missing parts of the jigsaw puzzle that we have to fill in. And Japan-EU FTA towards an Asia-Europe partnership. So all these joint efforts could certainly help to multilateralize preferential deals with a view to strengthening the WTO. So thank you very much indeed for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Watanabe-sensei. That was terrific. And I encourage you to take a look at his full presentation, his full PowerPoint. It's really excellent, comprehensive, and could never be presented in 10 minutes. But let's now turn to Jeff Schott.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to join Wendy Cutler and Professor Watanabe on this panel. I've worked with them for a long time, too. And I appreciate the opportunity to make a few comments following their excellent presentations. Dan has asked me to touch on two broad topics and do it in a couple of minutes. So I won't speak fast, but I'll try to pare down to the essentials. And the topics are to talk a little bit about the politics of the TPP and about the nature of prospective TPP expansion or enlargement, because like many, I'm very confident that Wendy and her colleagues are going to be successful in concluding a comprehensive TPP agreement, though perhaps not quite as quickly as they hope, because I think it'll take a little longer than the 7 weeks left in this year. First thing to note on the politics of TPP is that Japan has some very serious challenges in moving forward to improve its offers. And Professor Watanabe put forward notice on how the agricultural offers that Japan is making now are an improvement over what it has done in previous trade agreements. And that's the way it should be, because Japan's previous trade agreements were not of the same caliber as the TPP, and Japan has to do much better. And so that is a challenge. As Wendy noted, there are ways of dealing with sensitive items in trade negotiations, including through lengthening the period for implementing trade reforms. There's also precedents for partial trade reforms, and even on very rare circumstances for exemptions. But that's something that has to take into account the totality of the commitments that countries make in trade agreements, and that is going to be one of the most important aspects of the negotiations going forward. But not just for Japan. Also for the United States, because U.S. Officials need to prepare the ground for U.S. concessions, that is, changes in U.S. policy that the U.S. will offer in the endgame negotiations. And here, the U.S. debate over the Farm Bill hasn't helped matters very much. And indeed, what is being discussed in Congress on the Farm Bill could complicate the task of putting the TPP together, and certainly could reduce pressure on Japan to undertake comprehensive reforms in sensitive sectors and products if the United States is not willing to touch its sensitive products and sectors as well. Though again, under the same provisos of the what I just said about Japanese reform, that some may require lengthier implementation or partial reforms. Now, this is going to require extensive consultations on the Hill. I know a lot has been done already. More needs to be done. Getting support on the Hill for anything is not an easy matter. So this is likely to be a much more difficult negotiation than the one that USTR is pursuing at the negotiating table with our trading partners. That always seems to be the case. The domestic negotiations are much harder than the international negotiations, and indeed, I'm sure that's the case in Japan as well. Key to U.S. participation, I think, is getting a reauthorization of Trade Promotion Authority. The linkage of Trade Promotion Authority to the renewal of Trade Adjustment Assistance, I think is important, but it creates complications for quick action in the Congress. Similarly, the shutdown of the government delayed consideration of draft TPA legislation. And the next round of budget and debt ceiling talks is likely to do the same early next year, and so we might not see action on Trade Promotion Authority until the spring. And I think having Trade Promotion Authority in the pockets of U.S. negotiators is really critical to putting together the best TPA possible, TPP possible. And so that's something that I know Ambassador Froman wants to have as part of his negotiating arsenal as he goes forward in the endgame negotiations. Now, there's bipartisan support in both houses for Trade Promotion Authority, but there's no consensus on the priority objectives to be sought, and different parties and different groups want to stress issues that will be given prominence in the congressional mandate given to USTR. Some of the issues are holdovers from the May 2007 agreement between Congress and the executive on labor and environment and intellectual property. But there is also extensive debate in both houses on new provisions that might be included on currency manipulation. Fred Bergston made me say that last point. But it is important, and it has gotten attention both from important political constituencies and from key leaders in both parties in both houses of Congress. So that is the first part on political considerations. Given the short time I have, let me just say a few points on TPP expansion. TPP has always assumed, TPP countries have always assumed an agglomeration strategy for taking the TPP, expanding it, and broadening it across the Asia-Pacific region. The strategy assumed use of an accession clause. I think the strategy is correct. The tool is probably not going to be very useful because the U.S. has never used an accession clause in any of its previous free trade agreements. But we do see now the prospect for, over the medium term, a very substantial agglomeration of the TPP 12. I think if current negotiations are a key, give a good clue, there will be only 12 members that sign the agreement, probably in the first half of next year would be my optimistic scenario for concluding the TPP. But there are 4 countries that have already expressed significant interest in pursuing TPP negotiations sooner or later, led by Korea, which is unlikely to join the TPP before it concludes, but will likely be at the top of the list of new members, and Philippines, Thailand, and even Indonesia. You could see those 4 countries added to the TPP roster within the next few years after the TPP enters into force. That would be TPP 16, that interestingly includes that includes 11 of the 16 members of the RCEP. And Professor Watanabe talked about the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership as a complement to the TPP. It is a complement. It is not an equivalent. And indeed, it is unlikely to move in the same time period. It is unlikely to conclude anytime soon. It is unlikely to have the level of liberalization that makes much of a difference to Japan or the United States. Its main importance, in my view, would be as a key driver of intra-ASEAN integration, which is important for the region and for the medium-term progress on Asia-Pacific economic integration. I don't see the prospect for an integration of TPP and the RCEP, or a harmonization of those 2 agreements, just because they are so different. They're in different time zones. TPP will be concluded soon. RCEP is not going to be concluded anytime soon. And indeed, thinking about how you're going to get an agreement among the RCEP countries when you have such frictions in the trade, bilateral trade between China and India, for example, gives me a sense that that's going to be a long-standing and an inconclusive negotiation for some time. Now, one of the things that is important that has arisen and has accelerated since Japan joined TPP is the interest of China in getting more information and understanding the the TPP, and even raising questions about its potential participation in the TPP over the medium term. That creates a possibility of an entirely new dynamic for the TPP process going forward and its implications for the trading system. Because over the medium term, if China was able to meet the terms of the TPP and join the TPP 16, you could have quite a significant bloc that would really set the standard for global trade. And indeed, it would be a similar standard as being developed in the transatlantic negotiations that are just underway and are also going to be on a little longer time path than the TPP. So you could see a commonality of trading rules and obligations across the Asia Pacific and the transatlantic, bringing together most of the major trading countries in the world. And those, if you have that type of arrangements moving forward, it'll be difficult for other countries to stay out. And indeed, other countries will want the TPP countries and the transatlantic countries to move that agenda back to Geneva so that the poorest countries in the world who are left out of all of the mega regionals would not be discriminated against. This is a topic that deserves a lot more attention. We'll be paying more attention to it in ongoing research here at the Peterson Institute, but I've expended my time, and I thank you for your attention.
Great, thanks, Jeff. We're almost out of time, and I know Wendy does have to leave, but if Wendy, you'd indulge just perhaps one question, picking up on the idea of complementarity of RCEP versus TPP. Just wondering your thoughts on that.
We're asked that question a lot, and I think there is a perception that the U.S. is somehow against RCEP and we're pro-TPP, and nothing can be further from the truth. When we look at this, dynamic region in Asia Pacific, it's only natural that countries are, going to be joining with other countries in trade liberalizing arrangements. And so if you just look at RCEP and the TPP, they're not exclusive arrangements. In fact, 6 countries that are in TPP, if I have my numbers correct, are also in RCEP now. That'd be Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and the 3 ASEAN countries, Singapore, Brunei, and Malaysia. For the U.S., we recognize that TPP is not the only game in town, but for the United States, TPP is the game, because for us, we believe that a high standard, ambitious agreement that really addresses traditional trade barriers, but also starts to create rules in the new areas that are facing the region and has comprehensive coverage is really the way to go, and will have the most trade liberalizing outcome. So in short, I would agree with Jeff that RCEP and TPP and China, Japan, Korea, I mean, they're all complementary. They're all about trade liberalization, and so we don't view them as choosing between one or the other.
Great, thanks so much. Well, Wendy, we'll let you go. Maybe if, though, we can extend this maybe 5 minutes and take just a couple of questions for our remaining guests. Who's got a question?
Thank you very much. Mireya Solis from Brookings, and I have a question for Professor Watanabe. Sorry, Watanabe-san. Regarding the state of play of agricultural politics in Japan, because we have very mixed messages, if you will. I think on the one hand, it's incredibly positive, the discussion about eliminating the set-aside program that Wendy was referring to, and that has kept agricultural rice prices very high. But on the other, we saw, for example, Mr. Nishikawa, an agricultural politician at the Bali Summit, saying, we're actually now going to look into these 5 categories and maybe there could be further concessions. Then there was a lot of backlash against what he said, and the party launched a review of agricultural commodities. And if, according to the Nikkei article that you quoted, 95% is the upper ceiling of agricultural liberalization, that actually may be problematic for the other TPP countries. So I think that given what you heard in the first panel, people have the impression that Prime Minister Abe is indeed very powerful, and certainly so, but there may be limits as to how much he can push on agricultural reform. So I wonder, what is your impression as to how much can Japan give in terms of agricultural market opening?
Perhaps if we can just get one more question, and then we'll have the panelists respond. Unless there is no other question. Anyone? Some.
Good morning. Are mics on? Andrew Osterman, State Department, Japan Desk, Embassy Tokyo, and 40 years in this business. I reviewed a speech I gave in '79, and I'm glad to see the topics haven't changed on this issue. Let me bring the focus from the macro to the micro, if Jeff Schott could address this. When you deal with Japanese major corporations and you ask them about these policies, and you say, what strategic investment, manufacturing, marketing decisions and actions will you take over the next year, I have never heard a major corporation enunciate anything that would implement anything that we're talking about. So the big mystery is, as we move from the policy level to the economics to the trade level, how do we get that to happen at the corporate level?
Okay, why don't we begin with Watanabe-sensei?
Well, Mireya, thank you very much for your question. It's a very difficult question, tough question, but let me answer as much as I could. Agricultural market access is certainly the most difficult issue, whether it is at WTO or bilateral or regional free trade agreements. And even Koizumi reformist government could not touch upon the agriculture. So I think the agriculture is a kind of a very difficult area that has been untouched so far. But finally, we could see a little light there to bring Japanese agriculture into more kind of competition worldwide. And competition implies not only on the Japanese market, but also Japanese agriculture products to be exported to the overseas countries, overseas markets. So there should be a kind of balance, the opening up Japan's agriculture market, but at the same time, Japan to export its agricultural product. So that's one thing that I'd like to emphasize when we discuss agriculture issue in the current TPP negotiations. Having said that, I also like to agree with Imamura-san at the first panel. He mentioned that the average age of farming population in Japan is almost reaching 70s. I think it's, to be more precise, it's 66, 67. But anyway, in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, Japanese agriculture would have difficulties. So I think it's right time now that we should address the reform of Japanese agriculture. And we have no time to waste at this moment. So I think the TPP provides a good platform for discussions to which direction we should go in order to strengthen Japanese agriculture. Thank you.
Well, in specific response to the question given to me, it would be, you'd get a better answer if you asked it to the various U.S. and Japanese corporate officials who are in the audience. But I'll give you a general answer, and that is businesses will react when they have confidence that there is going to be policy change. And so one of the key things that concluding a free trade agreement does is provide policy predictability. It'll at least show how the rules of the road are going to change or what's going to stay the same. And then businesses can see how they plan their trade and investment strategies accordingly, both at home and abroad. And I think that's critical. You don't have that clarity yet because it's unclear how the sensitive issues are going to be addressed by the United States, by Japan, by other important partners in the TPP. Once you get a better understanding of that, I think business will move very quickly. And indeed, the announcement effect of an agreement will lead to business reactions and changes in investment and trade strategies long before the TPP provisions actually begin to be implemented over time.
Great. Well, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Watanabe-sensei. If you can hold your applause for 1 minute, now comes the most difficult part of the day. There is a buffet lunch in the back. There's an overflow crowd here. We're supposed to resume at 12:30 with my boss, Junko Chano. So all the food is good, so just don't be choosy, but if you can move very quickly, that would be terrific. Please join me in thanking our speakers.